Cold open. The valley called Isdalen, Ice Valley, sits outside Bergen, Norway, a place of steep grey scree slopes and silver birch trees that catch the low light like bone. On November 29, 1970, a university professor and his young daughter were hiking through the fog when they smelled something they would never forget: the sweet, greasy stench of cooked human flesh. They followed their noses to a hollow between two rocks. What they found was a woman. She lay sprawled on her back, her body blackened and blistered, burned almost beyond recognition, arms flung out, legs twisted in the boxer stance of muscles contracting in extreme heat. Her clothes had been reduced to tatters, but even the surviving scraps told a story. The labels had been cut out, every single one. When police turned her body over, her back was untouched. She had not been in a fire. The fire had been brought to her. And then came the fingerprints, or rather, what was left of them. Someone had filed them off, not burned away by the flames. Acid, abrasion. Someone had sat down, calmly, deliberately, and erased the ridges from her fingertips, the way you'd file a serial number off a gun. The woman burned in a Norwegian valley had no labels, no prints, and no name. And here is the part that still chills investigators. No one ever reported her missing. Not a husband, a mother, or a friend. She walked through the world, and when she died, the world didn't notice she was gone. She was the woman who wasn't anyone, the professional tourist. The investigation began at Bergen's railway station. She had checked 2 suitcases into left luggage before she died, and when police opened them, they found the inventory of a phantom: several wigs, prescription-free reading glasses, the kind you buy to change your appearance, not your vision, cosmetics, German marks, Norwegian kroner, Belgian francs, British pounds, Swiss francs, and face cream with a prescription label someone had scraped off with a blade. The woman had been moving through Norway for 8 months, checking into hotels under at least 9 different aliases: Genevieve Lancière, Claudia Tielt, Claudia Nielsen, Alexia Zahn Merches, claiming to be from Ljubljana, Vera Jarle, Fenella Lorch, Ms. Leenhaufer, Elizabeth Leenhaufer, a revolving door of Belgian cities, none of them true. Hotel staff remembered her as elegant and self-assured, but with one peculiar habit. She would check into a room, then demand another, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times. Paranoia or tradecraft, a woman looking for bugs, or a woman who simply couldn't sit still in the same space twice. She spoke English with a European accent and salted her conversation with German phrases. She bought new shoes in Bergen, paid in cash, and disappeared back into the grey streets. In Stavanger, she stayed 9 days at the St. Svithun Hotel as Fenella Lorch. On November 18th, she took the train to Bergen, registered at the Hotel Horderheimen as Elizabeth Leenho from Ostend, and stayed 4 nights. On November 23rd, she checked out. 6 days later, she was found burning in Isdalen. The code and the vials. The most disturbing item in her suitcases was a small notebook written in a code that Norwegian intelligence services could only partially crack. The code was simple but effective: letters for months, numbers for days. O Tome 2028p, October 22 to 28 in Paris. O Tome 29ps, October 29, Paris to Stavanger. O 30bn5, October 30 to November 5th in Bergen. A travel diary in cipher, tracking a woman who crossed borders like a ghost. The codebreakers noticed she never used the number 6, a deliberate quirk or a signature or a clue that means nothing 50 years later. And then there was the cash, not in a wallet, in glass vials, small containers, the kind you might keep medicine in, packed with rolled-up banknotes. Mobile wealth for a woman who couldn't trust a bank account, who couldn't risk a paper trail, who kept her life in vials and her history in code. Norwegian intelligence, the PST, swept in early and quietly. They took the notebook, interviewed hotel staff, and said nothing. For decades, the official line denied involvement. Then, in 2016, a retired intelligence officer admitted they'd identified the woman as a possible spy. For which side, he wouldn't say. The Cold War was at its peak. She'd been seen near Norwegian rocket testing sites. A woman who spoke 5 languages, changed her appearance, carried coded diaries and cash in vials. She fit the profile of a courier, a handler, something in the deep architecture of intelligence. But if she was a spy, where was her handler? Why was she alone, burning in a valley, fingerprints filed off like a terminated asset? The autopsy that raised only questions. The official cause of death, a combination of carbon monoxide poisoning and between 50 and 70 phenobarbital sleeping pills, a brand called Phenomol, foreign-made, not available in Norway. The official ruling, probable suicide, but the smoke particles in her lungs told a different story. She was alive when the fire was set. The question is whether she was conscious, whether she swallowed those pills willingly or was forced, whether she lay in the valley waiting for the flames, or whether someone stood over her and watched until she stopped moving. The petrol used to accelerate the fire was poured primarily on her torso. Her front was destroyed, her back was pristine. The arrangement of objects around her, a broken umbrella, a wristwatch, bottles with labels rubbed off, looked less like a suicide and more like a ceremony, as if someone had composed a still life around her death. She had never been pregnant. Her teeth bore excellent work, 14 fillings and several gold crowns, the kind suggesting a woman of means or government-paid quality. The work was not Norwegian. Isotope analysis in 2016 traced her childhood water to continental Europe, France, Germany, the borderlands where nations blur. Her jaw, thought destroyed for decades, was rediscovered in 2016 in a hospital cellar. DNA was extracted. An Interpol black notice circulated. Tips poured in, but no match. Her DNA floats in international databases, a ghost in the machine, waiting for a relative who has never wondered. The zinc coffin. In February 1971, the Isdal woman was buried in Mollendal Cemetery in Bergen. Her coffin was made of zinc, the kind that doesn't decompose, reserved for bodies that might one day be exhumed. A Catholic priest conducted the ceremony because a scrap of paper suggested she might be Catholic. Police officers stood in the rain and watched her lowered into the ground. Her headstone reads only, Ukjent kvinne, unknown woman. But that is not quite true. She was not unknown, she was erased. There is a difference. To be unknown is to be undiscovered. To be erased is to be unmade. Someone took the time, the quiet, obsessive, meticulous time, to remove every thread connecting her to a life. They cut the labels out of her clothes. They scraped the prescription off her face cream. They filed the fingerprints off her hands. They gave her a dozen names so she would have none. This was not the chaos of a murder. This was a professional deletion, an amputation of identity. Somewhere, in a dossier, in the sealed archives of an intelligence agency, there may be a file with her real name, a birth certificate, a photograph from before the wigs and the aliases, a mother who said goodbye and never saw her again. Or perhaps not. Perhaps even the file is empty. Perhaps she was so deep in the cold that she erased herself from the inside out, already a woman who didn't exist when she walked into Isdalen, a body waiting for the fire to catch up. Closer, the woman who took everything with her. The Isdal woman did not just die unidentified. She died unidentifiable. Someone put in the work, and that is the detail that keeps the case alive after half a century, not the coded notebook, not the glass vials, not the wigs or the aliases or the spy theories, but the sheer deliberate effort of unmaking a person. To file off fingerprints, you need time, a quiet room, a steady hand. You need to understand that you are not just destroying evidence, you are destroying a soul's last claim to itself. Who was she? A spy, a courier, a witness, a woman who knew too much, a woman running from something so terrible that death in a Norwegian valley was the better option. We will never know because she took the answers with her, burned and drugged and filed down to nothing, buried in a zinc box under a stone that does not even dare to hope for a name. She wanted to disappear. She succeeded. But the cost of that success is a question that still echoes. What kind of life demands that kind of death? What secret is worth that much silence? The Isdal woman walked through the world like a cipher, and without the key, she will never speak again. She took her secrets to the grave, and the grave, sealed in zinc, has kept them perfectly. Ukjent kvinne, unknown woman, but not forgotten.